Welcome, Game Dev Adventures, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Patrick Moran about getting a little sillier and simpler in games.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. This is a live, mostly unedited recording of a weekly event we actually host on our Discord, so feel free to come by and join us for the next one and ask your own questions live. There are links to join down below. As always, I'm your host, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster here at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is Patrick Moran. Patrick is the co-founder of Look North World, a UGC game studio and publisher, and we're actually going to talk about getting a little silly today. Patrick, welcome to the show. What are you having for lunch?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm having some tacos. Yeah.
Nice. What kind of tacos? There's a wide range
chicken.
of tacos.
Yeah, we make a bunch of meal prep chicken, and then we eat it with different stuff. So it's kind of boring, but tacos are always good, even when they're not great. So.
You can't go wrong with tacos. Tacos are like at worst a 5 out of 10.
That's right.
Maybe that's not true.
The floor is low. is high. Is high.
Right. Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Patrick. I hear you've been a little bit busy lately. You were on some kind of cadence. You were telling me earlier.
Yeah, we released. One of the amazing things about UGC is the speed of development. So we released 10 releases in 12 weeks. Both original strategic deals that we've done for other companies, licensing deals. It's a whole gamut of things that we've done. From something original that's we work with an indie dev to put out their first UEFN map to bringing Clue, the IP from Hasbro, to UEFN. So it's been quite insane. We grew from like 6 people to 60 over the summer, like over the course of 4 months, and employ folks all over the globe: India, Colombia, Brazil, all over the U.S. and Canada. So it's been quite the trajectory. So I'm looking forward to being able to reflect and enjoy these moments where I can can slow down a little bit and just talk about it.
A little bit calmer. Yeah, it's really interesting. As anybody here, most of the people in this room are people who are considering starting their own studio one day. And as you move into entrepreneurship and founding, there is a tricky double-edged sword that comes with growth. It's obviously exciting when you get to hire new team members, and exciting when you get to grow, and exciting when your product starts like finding its place. But yeah, it's also exhausting. So I feel you. Yeah, awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your time. The first thing that we always ask on this show, and that people are largely most curious about, is the origin story. So, Patrick, tell us about how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it quick. I, like many people, play video games for escapism, and similarly found that I enjoyed making them as much as I did playing them. And where I lived in San Antonio, Texas at the time, as a kid, and called every company that made tech and just asked for an engineering job. I had some engineering chops I had taught myself, was looking for someone to take a break, and luckily there was a startup that hired me to make business software. And I went quickly from, a year of like washing dishes and bussing tables and painting houses as jobs to then sitting in a literal garage at a startup writing code, and thought, okay, this is better. And what else can I do? And I set my sights on video games. I didn't know how it was done, but I did learn that there was a scene in Austin. So similarly, while working my way through college, this is the course of several years of I'd gone in to become an indie dev in games on top of working at the startup. I started driving up and just visiting. I would just show up you should not do this now, you might get arrested, but I would just show up at these companies and ask to talk to HR. And then they would say, well, they're kind of busy. And I would say, that's cool, I'll wait right there. And I would just wait in the lobby and make it awkward. And eventually I was offered a job in testing and QA at Ion Storm Austin, working on Deus Ex Invisible War, which was, kind of amazing. Harvey Smith was there leading that game. Warren Spector ran that studio. Randy Smith was heading up the Thief franchise sequel, Deadly Shadows. And I was put in this like way too hot, sweaty, humid QA lab. We're just packed in there with fans in the doorways. You had to step over the fans to get in because it was so hot. And just testing, Ion Storm games after they had become part of IDOS. It's part of history now. It's kind of weird it's like 20 years ago, but those are industry legends, and I just got to learn a lot. From there, I got a job in design, working on DS titles for things like Over the Hedge, and the kinds of things that are not really interesting, but it was like game design boot camp because we would ship a DS game every 6 months. Wow. So I got lots of reps, and that led to an opportunity to go to BioWare up in Canada. Worked on Mass Effect 2 and 3, then became studio director at Disney. Then I was one of the first product managers at Amazon Games. Worked on New World, among other things, for several years. Spent a year at MobilityWare, which is a great company in Orange County that does solitaire games. And you've never met a more hardcore player than a 80-year-old retiree who has nothing to do but play solitaire. Like they would play that same every day. They'd play the same like deal in solitaire like 100 times and get their like speed run down to like 5 seconds. And it was unbelievable. Like, it's just incredible. And it's all they did. And then spent 3 years at Kongregate as chief product officer, got them to record 16-year profit, and thought, okay, it's time to be an entrepreneur now. Like I've done enough where I can get another job, but I would like to go into startup world. So I did that. I had an opportunity to help out Mark Pincus's team, who's the founder of Zynga, one of his investments. Right as the venture market collapsed and the venture capital dried up. And so I spent a year failing to rescue that distressed company, and then was going to go back and get a job. And then Alex Seropian, the founder of Bungie, was also looking to start something new. And we were both looking at UEFN, and he invited me along. And so we started a year and a half ago, shortly after the announcement of UEFN. And we've expanded to include UGC platforms like Overwolf and maybe some others that we haven't announced yet. But we've shipped a ton of games, working with a lot of people like Hasbro, who's also on our cap table now. They're now an investor, Wizards of the Coast, and working with Overwolf on a number of things. Bandai Namco, we're doing a Gundam title we've announced. Amazon Twitch themselves are doing a whole offering around brands inside of UEFN. So we're the white label publishing service and developer for them. And a lot more that's coming, but we're taking a little bit of a break here. We also have a creator label where independent UGC get like what's a publishing deal, but they also embed with our game teams, so they get the support technically and tech art design as if they were part of a large team. So it's really about development of creators, not just publishing their content. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a really incredible ride watching this space grow. It evolves very quickly. I think the big contrast for me has been like New World was a $400 million game that took 7 years to come out. And we're seeing a lot of games spend hundreds of millions and take years and then do nothing, and then the teams shut down and get laid off. And we've been able to ship like 15 things and learn a lot. We're getting lots and lots of cycles. We're getting better with each one. And the rate of development, you can spend $100,000, $200,000, even $1 million on a UGC experience, or you can go spend hundreds of millions. So it's a lot. It's in a way to like prospect for new IP and new ideas and iterate on gameplay. It's a very quick way to find your way forward, and not just hope that it's not the field of dreams where you just build it and hope people show up. So it's been an amazing journey. That is the fast story. There's a lot of stories in there. But
we can absolutely dive into some of it. It's really cool. It's a fascinating story, and I think it's something that a lot of people will find exciting. I love you're probably right that sitting in somebody's office waiting for them to give you a QA job is unlikely to work these days. But hey, you never know, I guess. Don't get arrested, people, and don't blame us if you do. But I love that that's how you got started. I love the sort of just rote dedication, and I think that's really the main takeaway for anybody listening right now. It's that consistency of showing up, that may not be literally in person, but very much so even online, that still helps. I also like there's some similarities here to my own story. I loved your little throw out about how 80-year-olds are the most dedicated players you'll ever find. My first professional job was at the brain training game company Lumosity, and a huge chunk of our players were old folks, and like, yeah, they would play every little piece of content you could possibly give them. It was a fascinating time. And I also love that you're in UGC. It's a place that I really love exploring. I love the sort of implicit decentralization that comes with UGC, the fact that more smaller creators can get a piece of the pie. And I love that it is becoming more and more a norm. I'm currently working, for instance, with a modding company, and that's it has very similar roots, very similar vibes to what you're talking about here. So for those, let's assume like the uninitiated. Let's do the UGC for dummies. We threw out a couple of terms, UGC being one of them, UEFN being one of them. Give us like the beginner's guide to what the hell UGC is and why this space even matters. Why is it growing?
Well, user-generated content very much is modding. There are a couple of recent disruptions that make it different. One is the ability to monetize it directly. Companies are now understanding that this is valuable to them, especially in light of what it takes to like fund a live service team. It's a lot easier to give tools to the players and let them carry on. And if you give them financial incentive, they have the ability to really make quality content at scale. So I think that's the big one, is just the ability for you to actually make money directly. People were already making money through brand partnerships. Like they would get like, I don't know, Doritos or whoever to pay them to build this thing. But there was no long tail revenue. So they would just get what they get to build it, and then there'd be no additional revenue. That has changed. And you have things like Roblox and Fortnite. And the tool set for Fortnite is UEFN, or Unreal Engine for Fortnite, that are both now, that pool of money doesn't all go to the creators. They both function differently, but the pools of money are both around, $1 billion a year that are getting, allocated to the creator funds. So that's a sizable, there's not, it is very noisy, but there is a lot of opportunity to generate revenue there, directly or indirectly, say working with brands or companies that want to use it as a way to prospect and expand their IP. And in addition, UEFN specifically, they're being more explicit about this now, Unreal, but it is Unreal Engine 6, effectively. They are integrating, they're moving features from Unreal Engine 5, or new features coming to Unreal Engine. They're moving into UEFN. They're decoupling Fortnite from UEFN so it can run without having to run Fortnite. And eventually, in let's say 2 years, that forks off into UE6. So things like Verse, which is a new scripting language in UEFN, are going to be mandatory for the entire industry who work in Unreal in a couple of years. So a lot of the developers working on UEFN today are going to be some of the most employable people in 2 years. And those who've been working in Unreal Engine 5 and ignoring UEFN are going to suddenly be behind the curve. So it's a pretty important, like, if you work in Unreal Engine, it's pretty important to know where things are going and probably to spend some time learning UEFN.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating time period. What Roblox and Unreal UEFN with Fortnite are doing is something akin to the multiverse or metaverse that we're seeing pop up so much in popular culture these days. These massive IPs, these massive games that already independently make ridiculous amounts of money and are some of the biggest in the world, period, are now giving creators the ability to make their own content, and pretty distinctly different content. We're not just talking about like you can add your own skins like a more traditional mod. We're talking about like entirely different games built inside of what is now sort of effectively a game engine inside of Roblox or Fortnite or a couple of these other games. And I think one of the things that excites me about it is, one, I am always a fan of any way that an individual can make money in their own way. And then two, it's becoming more and more well recognized. So I feel like, even 5 years ago, and really even today, somebody who does modding is not quite viewed as like a real game developer. somebody who does UGC is like, yeah, you're working on something, but you're not working on your own games.
Yeah.
But it's becoming more and more popular and more accepted that that's just a part of game development. Period. It's just a different sort of phase of game development, and it's becoming more popular for game developers to understand how valuable that is.
Yeah.
My favorite example in recent note is Baldur's Gate 3. That happened for various other reasons, but Larian Studios will not be creating any more gameplay content for Baldur's Gate 3, despite the fact that it was Game of the Year and has made $100 million, or I don't remember, I think a lot more than that now.
Mhm.
But instead, they've been quoted as deliberately saying the community will make the DLC for Baldur's Gate, which is just super cool and super exciting in my
Right.
opinion.
And most notably, The Sims has canceled their sequel, and they're doubling down on UGC for The Sims 4.
Yeah.
So we're going to see more and more of this happening because of the expense of continued development on these things. And yeah, and so we exist. Like Northworld exists to be at the emergence of this happening in the industry, the speed of development, the low cost of development. It's You're touching on something else which is really interesting. Like I worked on Mass Effect. Our CEO, my co-founder Alex, founded Bungie, who built things like Halo. When we mention our background to this audience, we just get blank stares. There's always generational changes, but like from millennial to Gen Z, there's like a gulf, because Gen Z grew up playing on iPads. They played free games, and they're games that they became real gamers on. Typically, are Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, maybe Call of Duty a little bit, but it tends to be the three big ones that now have UGC platforms. And it's incredible, like, because they have, like, if you think about design lineage, we've created this whole, like, the whole video game industry largely operates on this AAA millennial view of what is quality, and what do we care about, and how big do games have to be, and what progression systems, and how do controls work. And then we see a complete disruption in game design lexicon with these new platforms. And you have the emergence of subgenres like Zone Wars and The Pit and Brookhaven, and Tycoon means something differently to them. And so when we got into this, I was streaming on our company account like 5 to 10 hours a week, just playing alongside people who play these games and just asking questions. And I did it strictly just to listen. And for about 6 months, I just streamed and learned a ton about what motivates these players, like what they're into. And I'm excited because I think fundamentally, I mean, I have to think through it. By the way, this is Bo. He's going to be around.
Hi, Bo.
For me, as a game developer, they care about person and expression and being in a social setting. And I think that's the definition of metaverse. I know that's kind of a bad word because so many things they've tried to latch onto that as a buzzword, Web3 or whatever. But there is the big change for me is that, like, now we have this third space that kids who grew up in the COVID generation congregated in around, with their friends because they couldn't in person for 2 years, and on devices and games that they grew up playing. And I think it's that third space, the willingness to actually hang out, just exist in a space, a digital sphere, is the real shift in generation. And that changes motivations, and it changes the kinds of things we make. And it looks probably more like Lethal Company and Power World and these games that are a little wonky, a little sillier, that just are more about fun and emergent gameplay, systemic gameplay, player agency, social interactions. I think this is a seismic shift. Now, like, us geriatric millennials, we're not going away until we die, but we are dying, and the audience is getting smaller. So you can't continue to have increasing budgets for the kinds of things that I traditionally consume, while the audience is not growing. And so there is like a pretty big shift in design happening. I observed one pretty big one as my generation came in, and World of Warcraft kind of took over the design lexicon, and I was suddenly working with designers, and all of their verbiage came from World of Warcraft. and that led to things like League of Legends and such. But yeah, so I think we're in another one, but it's bigger. It's like more acute now, and I think it's something everyone needs to pay attention to. But it also frees us up from having to make giant games that take years of our lives. It lets us have more power and having a bigger role in the team because they're smaller. So I'm very excited about it. It feels like a reset on expectations that leads us to a healthy place.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've all gotten, game developers for sure, but even game players have gotten kind of sick of the giant budget hire and fire cycle that we've like fallen into in the modern game industry. And it's also interesting, you mentioned metaverses being a bad word. I think much like just gamification in general, the metaversing is not a product into and of itself. Something has to be interesting, exciting, and already captivating to an audience for the metaverse to plug into it. That's what we're seeing with Fortnite and Roblox and kind of Minecraft and kind of those really heavily modded games like Skyrim. There's hundreds of new, Skyrim mods a day. That's a universe for players to be inside of and continue to expand and be comforted by. Before we get to community questions, there's a couple waiting. You gave us the topic, how games are becoming sillier. Let's see, wait, there was another word. Simpler and sillier. Can you give us the 101 there? Sillier and simpler for dummies. What do you mean by that?
Well, yeah. There's less and less of the big budget games happening with more layoffs and budget cuts. And I think companies on those titles are going to just double down and spend more on the things that they know are going to work. Like spend more on whatever big hits coming out next. So what is the rest of the industry? Because there's a lot of developers out of work now. And I remember like I started playing games in the 80s and the 90s, and the things that I was always really into were the things that allowed the player a great deal of authorship in their experience. So things like SimCity or The Sims, things like the immersive Sims that Warren Spector worked on with System Shock, and there was a lot of ability to improvise and have fun with. And part of the reason for that is creating custom authored experiences that can fill up a full 20 30 hours of game time is very expensive. And so back when budgets were smaller and the tools were not as good and graphics weren't as good, we had to fill the space with giving like emergent gameplay and the ability to replay and like I think that was fundamental to how we could maximize game time and keep people engaged. As budgets went up and tools got better, we could fill it with cutscenes and more levels and more stuff that was very authored. And I think now game design is shifting to having to be more resourceful and think about like, how do we give a set of tools? Like Lethal Company is great because so much of that it's a very simple game, but like it's the social emergent gameplay that occurs in the wonky situation and the inclusion of weird physics and silly ladders, and like that is what's entertaining and watchable.
The first moment your buddy disappears off the mic and you don't know what the hell happened.
That's right. Like that's a very that didn't cost them much to implement, but it's a moment that is unforgettable. And I think like the more people lean into giving the players these unexpected surprises and tools to tell their own story or have just chaos and silliness, the more not only are you going to hook people and make them feel like the author of their own experience, but you make things that work marketing wise too for today. People's attention spans are so divided. A podcast like this will get caught up in clips and shared on other platforms. Like that's how information is disseminated now. And so if games are if you need an hour to tell someone what the game is about and it's super authored and you just have to play it, that's a harder thing to market than something that has these little clippable moments. And so the silliness and the simplicity, clarity of what's happening works for the way that marketing works today as well. And they're more likely to find an audience, especially when content creators, they want those moments. They need content to clip and put on their social media. So they're going to play things that traditionally like make it easy for them to generate lots of content for their own social media. So one of our investors is Crush Music. Live Nation backs them. crush manage artists like Weezer, Sia, Kesha, Green Day, Fall Out Boy, all sorts of artists and producers. And one of the things they challenge us with is moving at the speed of culture. When the culture picks up on something, being able to respond to that quickly. And UGC gives that opportunity where like something can happen culturally, a moment, and we can do something with that. We can have something out in 2 to 4 weeks that captures and plays into that moment, and it has a dialogue in an artistic way with society. And so I think that's a really interesting idea, because then you can like insert yourself into a conversation that's happening online, whereas before you cannot. So yeah, I think silly, simple, you're doing yourself a favor on the marketing side. And these UGC tools are one way to do that, modding tools, because you're not spending time on the fundamentals. You're just getting that gameplay loop and the thing that's special, and you're distilling it and putting that out for people to give you feedback on.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I am reminded of one of the reasons that I'm excited about this space and that I love this space. I'm a game designer in an industry, and where I tend to specialize is ed tech and UGC. And the reason I love that so much is because it's also an emerging place for people to get started in game development.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a place for those who are struggling to find jobs at more traditional companies and actually take financial ownership themselves. I'm reminded of way back way back in the day now, getting started with the Halo Combat Evolved modding tools, and how freaking cool it was to make a Banshee that just like carpet bombed plasma grenades over my buddies,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to do that. I would love, actually, before we head to community questions, I've got one more for you, which is the people in this room and listening to this podcast are largely junior developers and indie founders. So they are people who are doing exactly that, are trying to get work, trying to create work for themselves and probably their best friends. How might you recommend, or what are some of your thoughts on capturing some of the finances from this space as an individual indie developer?
Yeah. Okay, there's a few avenues to do it. One is just publish something, hope that Discover algorithms treat you well, surface your experience, and you get a big audience and you can monetize it. On Roblox, you'll have power-ups you sell. On UEFN, it's just pure engagement time. The other is strategic partnerships. So let's say a publisher wants to get in on the space. To get those, you're gonna need to have some published work. You're going to need 2 or 3 things on the platform that you're targeting, that you have put out, and talk about why you made it, what the lessons were. And if you're an indie and you don't have an IP, one of your reasons for why it's not a hit is, we didn't have a great IP. It was our first time, but we know how to use the tools. We're good at it. We understand the audience. You can kind of put use your weakness as a strength in pitching strategic partners. And the best place to find that work, honestly, we go to a conference, we do 50 to 60 meetings. We set it up before we go. We reach out on LinkedIn. It's a whole sales funnel. So Unreal Fest has multiple locations for UEFN. There is a Roblox conference. The GDC, Game Developer Conference, is classic. We typically do a 1-2 of DICE in Vegas, and then GDC. We do 50 to 60 meetings each, pitching, and then we follow up. It takes us about 9 to 12 months to land one of those deals.
Wow.
They can be faster if you get into some of the user groups where these folks congregate. Like there's a verse scripting group that's super exclusive and I'm not even a part of, but if you get in on that, there's potentially so-and-so is working on a project and they need someone to write verse code for them, and they're going to pay you to do it, so you can start to collaborate on paid gigs on some of these online Discord communities. The other is just brand deals. Doritos, Honda, whatever. Again, you're going to need a portfolio of work that you've done. Those deals can typically get done faster because they're usually urgently moving towards some release of something. And that's just 100% network. And so you just have to use your personal network. If you're in Nebraska and you don't know anybody, one way to shortcut that is to go out, invest, and be attending some conferences, setting up meetings in advance. Just by being at an event physically, you position yourself as somebody who's serious and somebody who's someone to talk to, because you're there and it's already exclusive. So You just got to build a network, be present, have a portfolio. That's how I would start. As far as funding goes, there are like Game Fam, who's technically a competitor, though we love them. They're great to hang out with. They started a fund. Just it's like a creator fund. We also have a creator label application on our website. That's different than the creator fund because not only do we fund things, but we'll put you alongside our own development teams internally and have mentorship and guidance. And if you have a strong, like if you have a weak spot, like I don't do art, we'll couple you with artists. If you need some help on the tech side, we're there to advise you and help you along. So we're also developing people along the way. So there are multiple ways to get funding that are friendly to new folks in the creator space. And then I think like Overwolf has they do like UGC platforms for things like Arc. And one that that's going to be a much smaller pool than UEFN today, at least. Meaning like if you go build a free mod for Arc and it gets popular, there's a creator fund there from Overwolf, and they'll fund more stuff for Arc. So you just got to do your research for those. Look for creator funds. Look for who's backing these UGC platforms. There's usually when there's a new UGC platform announced, there's also a separate fund allocated to seed it with content. So build something small and quick on that platform to show that you are into it, and then parlay that through Discord or LinkedIn into an introduction to whoever owns that fund. Those are a number of tips. Yeah, if it was easy, there would be less money for everybody. If it's because it is hard to find funding, that's what allows people to get funding. There's not as many hands to feed, so you have to be willing to hurdle the barriers to get to funding, but it is out there.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's really interesting. So at the Indie Game Academy, we teach people how to make games, and the biggest way that we do that is project based. We help you work with an interdisciplinary team and actually launch something. Yeah, and part of the reason that we do that is because we hear time and time again from smart people like you that one of the first things you need is just a portfolio of work to show that you can do the work. It sounds to me like it's a similar approach here in this space. You and your studio already need to probably, it sounds like the very first step is just launch a couple of little things. And those things have a chance of working on their own, but then that also gives you the evidence to showcase that you could handle a partnership that you can then go after and try to find when you've got a couple of those smaller titles under your belt. Does that sound about right?
That is correct, with an emphasis on small.
Yeah. Yes.
If your goal is to open the door to funded opportunities, don't go make your dream game on a UGC platform or mod or separately. Like, go make something. And that is the advantage of UGC is like it can literally take you 1 to 2 weeks, and now you have something in your portfolio. You can take a month, ship 1 or 2 things, and now you're good. And you learned a bunch, and you can talk about it. It doesn't don't overcomplicate it. It like people who look at these deals, they're just looking to check a box. Like, oh, have you shipped something in UEFN? Oh, it's on a deck. You did. Check. They probably won't even go play it. They'll probably just see it on a deck. There's an island code. They look it up on Fortnite GG or Roblox or whatever, and then they go like, cool, check, they've done it. And then everyone, 80% of the other people they're looking at get crossed out. So it really is like, don't overcomplicate this. Like, make it look nice for the audience that you're building for. Ship it, and now you have portfolio. It raises your profile significantly.
That's awesome. There's people in the audience making jokes about what that meeting must be like. How do you feel about Doritos? They ask. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah, that's not too far from the truth. Yeah.
Incredible.
I love Doritos. I'm all about the Cool Ranch. Very underrated. Have you shipped UEFN? Yeah, absolutely. We're here. We're excited. Okay, cool. Let's do it. That's it.
We made a game about Doritos in UEFN.
It's often that simple. Yeah. How much are you charging? It's this amount. All right. Sick. Let's go to the contract. Let's start working on it.
You all heard it here first. Y'all eat Doritos. That's the the secret.
I don't know if that's good advice, but yeah.
Yeah, that was delicious. A joke. If that was not clear. We've got Rick on stage here for our first community question, though. Rick, do you want to jump in and hit Patrick with it?
Yeah, Patrick, this has been really fascinating. You were saying earlier that you had 6 people in your team and you've recently bloomed up to 60, and you've released 10 projects, 10 products in the past 12 weeks. So I was curious, how many products do you develop simultaneously? Like I would assume you're not doing one product per week. That would be crazy. So how many do you develop simultaneously, and how
Yeah.
do you structure the A to Z of that approach with your team?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. So we have 2 internal teams. They're multidisciplined. And then we have solo creators that can pretty much do most everything they need on their own. And we have several of those because these teams range from 1 to 5 people. And then we have some other studios, co-dev studios that have teams that are independent. So each of our core internal teams also manages, like, oversees, produces external teams. UGC is user generated content. So, like, using tools for sorry, I just saw that question. Yeah, it's using tools to build games for other games. Um the yeah, so the we actually run a really efficient model. So developers in the US are expensive. They're the most expensive in the world. Typically, with benefits, salary, taxes, all in, you're running, like, in the US today, you're running, like, on average 15 to 18K for quality a month for quality developers. In Brazil, it's more like 2. In Colombia, it's more like 5. In Eastern Europe, it's more like 3. And so you can literally get multiple people for the same price of someone in the US. So part of what we do is we hire our core creative teams internally, and then we couple them with co-dev teams in Brazil, Colombia, other developers around the world. And that lets us scale capital efficiently and be competitive overall. Yeah, and we have centrally, we have QA and production. They float across all the projects, and we have, like, a CTO that's on one of the main teams, but also is overall a tech and similar for design. But we're growing, which means we're going to reorg every 6 months. So, like, there's no prescriptive way here, and it really depends on the people you have. And so it's different for every studio and every combination. Yeah, I would say that, like, we try really hard to have, like, I think today we have 12 full-time salary people, and the rest are all contract. And there's a reason for that. Especially if you're doing anything strategic where you have a project for 6 months and you don't know what's after. We want to avoid cyclical layoffs. So we operate more in, like, a more traditional movie production model where we bring teams in and out, but we've been holding steady the last few months. And it has been a release a week, and I have not taken. I've taken 3 days off in 3 months. So, but it's hard to complain about success. So, like,
Take care of yourself,
it's just
Patrick.
where we're at. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I will. I'm going to take quite a bit of time off at the end of the year, so
That's
that'll
good.
be good.
That's good. Does that answer your question, Rick?
It kind of does. I guess I was just wondering, like, when you come up with the idea, you say, okay, well, let's try this. Like, what is the idea of taking it from your fundamental concept and then saying, let's spin it up? And then when do you decide to really kick it into high gear? And then what does that look like with your team dynamics?
Well, it depends where it comes from.
Contractor shifting.
Yeah, it depends where it comes from. We assign a project owner, like the person, and it could be anybody. It could be artist or designer, just the person who's going to see it from start to finish. We have traditional milestones like first playable, alpha, production mile. We structure it that way. We have a standard list that over time kind of, it's weird because it's more like a mod. So we found our milestone definitions to be less like a full game and more like a mod, which is it's different, because you hit first playable so fast, but you need a lot of iteration, and there's really no soft launch on these platforms. Anyways, and then we figure out, like, okay, who do we need to build this? And we do a production planning meeting, and we talk about the people we need, and we allocate headcount, and we figure out, okay, who do we have in our network? Are we going to do it internally? And there's a lot that goes into each of those discussions. We do a forecasted budget and cash flow analysis, and I calculate the cost down to the dollar for every single person. And then we also look if we're getting funded. There's you have to submit a milestone. It can take up to like a month for it to be approved. then it takes 60 days after you invoice, but sometimes that gets messed up. So from the time that we're putting out cash to the time we get money can sometimes be 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a whole like cash flow analysis that's like, here's when we spend the money, we get paid, and making sure that we don't run out of money and put us in. And so there's a lot that goes into each project. Yeah, but during this time period, we've had people on our team that are responsible for delivering a game internally, but also are managing like 4 other things happening with external partners. So it's all of us wear a lot of hats. It's very startup-y. But yeah, I hope that helps. Like, we're also figuring, like, we've been at this, Alex, our CEO, has been at it for 30 plus years. I've been at it for 20 plus years. We're always figuring this out. We hired a new producer at the end of last year out of college. And they were like, I thought it would be more less chaotic. I thought it would be more structured, and like, I thought you would have the secret sauce. And you're like, no, like, there's just so many new things every project. This is a new platform. This is a new genre. Like everyone has its unique. It's part of what I love the games industry for. Like, every problem is its own new set of challenges, and something that I've learned over 20 plus years is that less important than getting the perfect way to execute or the perfect plan is the belief from the team that this is the right plan. So a lot of what we do with our teams is like, okay, here's the data, here's everything, here's my perspective. What do you think? And we let them, and that discussion is more important than the outcome. The fact that they're getting alignment, and they're talking about their worries, and they're disagreeing, and they're coming to the same place eventually, like, or at least they understand where decisions came from, and they understand this is the plan and here's why. That's more important than whether that's the most optimal plan from my perspective. So I would encourage everyone on a team to just make sure you're talking about it openly, and giving data and transparency, and getting everyone bought in, and even saying like, hey, I hear you saying this. I feel we should go this other way. Here's why we're going to do it. Like, and giving each other grace to make the wrong call and mess up. Like, you should never have a plan that has to go perfectly. Like, your every plan and every organization, a team, every production plan should allow for like 30 to 40% of mess up. Like, we put a lot of hedge and a lot of padding to just allow mistakes to happen and learn from it.
Love that.
That's cool. It sounds like rather than shoveling the earth, you just want to start a landslide.
It's an interesting analogy. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and you can't scale if you're just trying to like engineer the perfect setup. So I'm just trying to give everyone listening and watching like agency permission to like just start and figure it out. Like, it's okay if you don't have all the answers. I
love that.
Yeah,
it's a big perspective. It's something, working with so many juniors, it's something I run into all the time. People almost always have some reason that they're sort of gatekeeping themselves. This is not ready. That's not ready. I'm not good enough here, whatever. And yeah, if nothing else, take away from this episode, just start. None of us know what the hell we're doing. We're figuring it as we go. I love too your comment here about a huge part of getting the team, basically a huge part of making a great product is not having the perfect plan, but is instead having the team bought into the plan. I was just talking about this recently with a few friends, because personally for myself, what I've been practicing is design leadership. And I've come to believe recently that about maybe 30 to 40% of a good design is just that the team believes it's a good design, even if it's not a good design. Like a crappy design that people believe in will still be a crappy design, but a mediocre design that people believe in will be a great design. So I love that you bring that up and confirm that for me. Second question from Misha. I'm going to read for them. It's kind of an interesting one. What is your perspective on AI tools in indie and AAA?
I have a couple perspectives. One is we need a lot more legislation and regulation around allowing authors to claim ownership and allow or not allow AI, or to be monetized or not monetized. But AI tools are here. They're used often and frequently. They're not there yet. They're not replacing game dev yet. And they could be, I mean, they're going to be, for some types of games, they're going to be a huge empower if you are okay using it and you feel good about it. And that's not, I'm not gaslighting. I'm not judging. I just think like, okay, here's another perspective. I remember for decades walking around game studios when we were in person, and I would walk by an artist's desk who was effectively rotoscoping, tracing over a texture of tree bark or leaves. They pulled it from Google Images. They were painting over it in the style. And I've also seen like where they pull in a bunch of Google Images and they collage it and they use a bunch of Photoshop, and then it's not the original asset anymore. And so the process of copying, using other people's IP to generate game assets has been widely used in the games industry for decades. What AI has done is it's accelerated it, it's industrialized it, and now there's people making money at it. And so it's like created like this realization, like, oh, maybe this is a problem. So my perspective is that it can be a huge accelerator early on. I haven't seen anything to think this is going to replace all of us and make a game at the touch of a button. I do think game developers who know how to use coding copilots, who know how to use AR tools and music, are going to be more employable and have higher output. Yep. Because I think there's a lot of massaging and a lot of knowledge of those tools that's needed to get excellence out of them. And at the end of the day, art has always seemed to always happen on the thing that's the exception. You know, once everything starts to look the same, it gets boring and people are less likely to be interested. So it's always the thing that operates outside of the median, and AI will always operate in that median, I think. Yep. This is just perspective. So the more you make things that aren't like anything else, that are still great, the more you insulate yourself against being ripped off by AI. Because it's, you know, the more steps it takes in getting an AI to work for you, the harder it is for someone to do the same. Yeah. But it's still early, and I hope regulation does a lot to protect artists and creators. But we'll see. We'll see. Like, we're not there yet. There's a lot of funding. It's a bubble. There will be some winners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely an interesting time when it comes to AI. I myself use AI in my workflow as something like a creative assistant. And I think in general, I urge students to do the same, because I think of exactly what you just said, like stubbornly refusing to use the tools because they aren't well regulated yet, I think mostly just puts you behind the curve. And absolutely, let's insist on better regulation. But I totally agree. Like, if we think about it basically like a new piece of software that's come out that is being well used, then like, of course, you need to learn the new piece of software in order to stay hireable. I do think, I hope I'm not wrong, because, you know, AI is on an exponential curve now, and we'll see where it goes. But I do think your statement about it always being the median is probably accurate. It will never be able to, or it is unlikely that it will be able to produce the same kinds of new avant-garde pieces that humans will be able to. So I think staying on that edge and trying to make yourself differentiated is maybe one of your best protections against it. Awesome. All right, we got a third question from the audience. Wendy, want to jump on?
Sure. Hey, Patrick.
Hello.
The doggo is gone, I noticed, though, which was better because now I'm able to focus on you. So thanks.
He's distracting. He's a problem.
I am very early in my game dev journey. So thrive on stories and learning acronyms like UGC. I was wondering too early on, I'm like, what is that? So thank you for whoever asked that. I would just like, so again, speaking of stories, I would like to know more about your time working on Mass Effect. I mean, I'm sure many others here are huge fan. You know, so anything, you know, stick out to you in terms of that experience?
Yeah, it was a lot. I worked on the N7 missions on Mass 2 and then multiplayer on Mass 3. I love the franchise, and it was a dream to work on it. I couldn't believe that I landed that gig, and it was awesome. And I think like my favorite memory is we took home the playable build of Mass Effect 2, and it was playable from start to finish. Many of it was gray box, meaning like it was just, they're literally boxes that you walk through, and then you go up to an NPC, you click on them, and there's a text box of this conversation is when such and such does this thing. And it was but it was stubbed out. And I remember playing it and thinking, it just felt like there was something special. Like there's been a couple times in my career where I could feel like it was just it just felt like this is going to be great. And most of the time this is terrible and I hate it, and oh my God, how are we going to ship this thing? I mean, that's the majority of game development. And so those rare moments where you're working on something and you like really love it and you really feel like we have how much time left? Like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. Like, that's very rare. So that was the first time I ever experienced that, and it was pretty amazing. There was also an interesting transition happening when Ray and Greg, I got to meet them, and towards the end of their tenure, they're founders of BioWare, and they were in the midst of transitioning leadership to a new generation, so they could exit post Cell. And so being in BioWare towards the end of that era, as the transition to new leadership was starting, difficulties of leveling people up and transitioning power and leadership and trying to leave their legacy on that place, that was a really fascinating insight to have in reflection. At the time, it created a tremendous amount of difficulty in working there, but in reflection, I'm really grateful for having seen that, and now owning a business, I can reflect on it and glean like new insight from that time, and how to act as a leader and how to treat people. They were both really, and still are, really great leaders. And I remember I was walking the halls. It was week 1, and Greg Zeschuk, one of the co-founders, said, "Hey, Patrick." He like recognized me and said hello. There was 400 of us, and
Wow.
I learned that every week he got employee photos, and memorized everyone's name every week, so that when he first saw them, he would be able to call them by name and just
Holy
validate
cow.
them.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a pretty. So I love Mass Effect, and I'm really hopeful the new Dragon Age is great, and I'm a big fan. You know, speaking of millennial games that Gen Zs don't know, but like it's definitely
We'll
for
never
me.
play.
Yeah. Not so silly and not so simple, but I do love their games.
Oh, so good.
But I did learn a
Amazing.
ton.
Cool. Thank you so much. I can just see it, you know, how cool of an experience that was as you told it. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Thanks for asking, Wendy. Yeah, I tried not to fanboy too much when I realized that you were coming on, but Mass Effect is easily one of my favorite series of all time.
Thanks.
So very cool to
I appreciate
chat with
it.
you,
Well,
Patrick.
it was a big team and a lot of
Yeah.
people who touched it, and
Yeah,
you know, so kudos to Casey Hudson and that leadership team who led that franchise.
absolutely. Yeah, having good mentors is one of those just like life-changing things. Like that's really how you level up, is you have people to learn from who are already awesome.
Yeah.
So find those people and then hold them close and say thank you and whisper that they're awesome to them every day.
I agree.
All right. It is the end of the episode. Before we say goodbye, Patrick, we like to do 2 things here. Number one, we like to actually assign homework. Homework should be something that takes about an hour that the listeners can do in the next week to help them practice some of what we talked about here today. So what would you like to give us for the homework here?
Well, if you aren't familiar with these platforms, if not Roblox, Fortnite, go play some games, watch some streams, like get to know this audience, not even beyond the games, like get to know the audience. So go play games with them on these platforms. Try different genres, try different stuff, try to understand it. Your initial reaction, if you don't play on these, may be like, these games are terrible, I don't like them. But know that these are your future players.
And they make
and
millions
this is
of
where
dollars.
they are today.
Yeah.
And yeah, you should pay attention.
Yep.
If you are playing those games and you're aware of these platforms already, I would say go build something and do it in a week. Like these,
Awesome.
like you could do it on 1.0, so you don't even have to know creative. There's a creative mode 1.0 that you can flip into while playing a map solo, and you can build something just from the perspective of the player using those devices.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can go to UEFN and use that tool set. But either way, just make something and put it up. Ship
Amazing.
something.
I love it. All right, so you've got a bronze version of the homework and then like a gold version of the homework for everyone who's listening. So if you are not yet familiar or you're not yet comfortable with game development, go and research and at least play a few of these games in Roblox, UEFN, or something related, and then post it on LinkedIn. You can tag the Indie Game Academy as well as Patrick Moran and myself, and we may come by and tell you that you're awesome. You can also, there is a section of the Discord specifically for this episode where you can drop your homework if you're feeling a little bit less, if you're feeling a little bit anxious about posting publicly. The gold standard version of the homework, though, is just to make something. And the Indie Game Academy has an indie dev share. We will absolutely share your cool Roblox creation or whatever. So please do so. That's your homework. Let's see it. All right. Before we say goodbye, Patrick, any last words of wisdom or anything you want to plug?
Well, I just want to commend everyone who showed up. So many people want to make games, but they don't put forth the extra effort. And it's great to see everyone on here. Like, this is how you do it. You get plugged in, you learn as much as you can, you make yourself accessible, be in a community. So just mainly a kudos to this audience for doing what really will set them apart long term.
That's awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Heck yeah. Yeah, give yourself a pat on the back for just being here and learning and spending some time. All right, Patrick, thank you so much for being here and answering these questions and giving us some insight. Absolutely. It's been great. Thank you to those who asked questions, and thank you to you listeners for listening. As always, we ask if you had a good time, think of one other person in your life who could use this episode and send it along to them for us. We'll be here again next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, hope to see you there. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.